Picture the Texas Panhandle, flat in every direction. Fields that used to grow cotton, sorghum, and wheat, now dirt. Not drought damage, not just a bad season. These are farms where the families locked the house and drove away for good because the water isn't coming back. Texas is the second largest economy in America. It sits on one of the largest underground water reserves ever discovered, and it is pumping itself dry in real time. How does that happen? And is there anything that can stop it? The geography that made Texas great is the same geography that makes this problem almost impossible to solve. Texas water runs on two underground systems, and they couldn't be more different in scale, geology, or the timelines they operate on. The first is the Ogallala. It sits beneath the high plains, stretching from South Dakota down through the Texas Panhandle. It filled from glacial melt over millions of years, during an era of the Earth's history that has no modern equivalent. The Ogallala is now completely disconnected from today's rainfall. The water down there is ancient. It is not being replaced. The recharge rate, the speed at which rainfall seeps back in, runs at roughly 1 inch per year in Texas. The drawdown rate runs at 1 to 3 feet per year. The math isn't close. Texas is withdrawing at roughly 20 to 30 times the rate of natural replenishment. And in the southern Texas section of the aquifer, where recharge is the slowest and the aquifer is shallowest, the numbers are worse. In early 2025, researchers at the University of Texas estimated that if extraction rates hold at current levels, up to 70% of the Texas Panhandle section of the Ogallala could become unusable within 20 years. Not depleted entirely, but unusable. The remaining water drops below the depth where pumping is economically viable. If the aquifer were fully drained and left alone, natural refill time, roughly 6,000 years. The second system is the Edwards Aquifer, a karst limestone formation beneath central Texas. This one is totally different. Fractured, porous rock that water moves through quickly. It stretches across roughly 3,600 square miles, and it's the primary drinking water source for about 2 million people, including most of San Antonio. Unlike the Ogallala, the Edwards does recharge from rainfall, but that responsiveness cuts both ways. When it rains, it recovers. When it doesn't, it drops fast. In 2011, the worst drought Texas had seen in decades pushed the Edwards to critical levels and triggered mandatory pumping restrictions for the first time. 2 aquifers, one draining on a geological timescale, one vulnerable to any single bad drought year. Now here's what made pumping both of them so attractive and legal, even as the levels fell. In 1904, the Texas Supreme Court made a decision that still governs groundwater in the state today. The ruling established the rule of capture. The principle is simple. If groundwater is under a landowner's property, it belongs to that landowner. Pump as much as needed. If a neighbor's well goes dry because the aquifer was drained between the two properties, that's not the pumper's legal problem, as long as they weren't trying to harm them. This wasn't a reckless decision in 1904. It was a practical one. The state was still sparsely populated. Agricultural technology meant hand-dug wells and horse-powered pumps. The idea that any individual or company could drain a significant fraction of an ancient aquifer wasn't a scenario anyone was designing around. Then came electricity, then diesel pumps, then center pivot irrigation systems, those long mechanical arms visible from the air, drawing green circles on the landscape. Those circles are each pulling from the same underground formation. A single modern center pivot system can pull millions of gallons per year. Multiply that across tens of thousands of wells across the Panhandle, and the math looks very different than it did in 1904. The rule of capture was written for a world that no longer exists, but the law didn't update when the technology did. There's one critical distinction. Texas surface water, rivers, lakes, streams, belongs to the state. The state can regulate it, allocate it, and deny permits for it. Groundwater is different. Under Texas law, groundwater belongs to the landowner. The state's power to regulate it is legally constrained. Groundwater conservation districts exist across Texas. They are local bodies with some ability to set well spacing rules, require permits, and limit withdrawals. But they are patchwork. Not every aquifer region has one. The rules vary widely, and none of them can override the underlying property right. There's no statewide mechanism that can tell a farmer, a city, or a data center company that they're pumping too much from a shared source. Compare that to the Colorado River. 7 states and the federal government have been fighting over allocation rights to that single river for over a century. Those fights are brutal, but they at least operate on the acknowledgement that the resource is finite and shared. Texas groundwater has no equivalent. Each well operator works under a legal framework built functionally on the assumption that the aquifer is infinite. The rule wasn't malicious. It just wasn't built for what Texas became. What Texas became, in the Panhandle especially, was one of the most productive agricultural regions on Earth, and that achievement is now unwinding. The Texas Panhandle sits over the Ogallala's southern end, the driest, shallowest portion, and it's the section depleting fastest. Average annual rainfall in Amarillo runs about 20 inches, in Lubbock, slightly less. That sounds thin, but compare it to the western edge of the aquifer in New Mexico, where farmers get even less. The point isn't that the Panhandle is a desert. The point is that it's farming at a scale that only works if something else is supplying the water. That something else has always been underground. There's almost no recharge in this section of the aquifer. None from runoff. The soil is too dry and cracked to absorb a fast rain. When the Panhandle gets a rare burst of heavy rainfall, farmers watch the water sheet off the baked surface and disappear into dry creek beds. The aquifer doesn't gain an inch. The only water that matters is the ancient water already down there. At peak production, the Texas High Plains produced roughly a quarter of the entire U.S. cotton crop. The economy of Lubbock, Amarillo, and dozens of smaller towns was built on those fields. Built on the equipment dealers, the grain co-ops, the gin workers, the fuel suppliers, the banks that financed the season. Every dollar of agricultural output in the Panhandle carries with it a chain of economic activity stretching through the entire region. Now, vast stretches of Texas farmland lying over the aquifer no longer support irrigation. Some counties have seen irrigation capacity fall 50 to 80%. Farmers who can afford to switch are moving to dryland farming, crops that survive on whatever rainfall shows up. Sorghum instead of cotton, broomcorn instead of corn. Many aren't switching, they're walking away. The towns notice. School enrollment across the Panhandle has been declining for years. Nearly every county in the region saw lower numbers in 2024 than the year before. In December 2024, the Amarillo School Board voted to close 3 elementary schools, Park Hills, Pleasant Valley, and Sunrise, citing a 12% drop in enrollment. Employment rates and median household incomes across the Panhandle region run below the Texas state average. The population of rural West Texas counties has been declining for years, while the major metros keep growing. This is what it looks like when the resource that built a regional economy starts to run out. The fields go quiet first, then the schools, then the storefronts on the main street. But there's a difference between what's happening in the Panhandle and what's happening 400 miles southeast. The Panhandle is losing a commodity. San Antonio is losing its drinking water. Those are different problems with different consequences. San Antonio is the 7th largest city in the United States. The metro population has roughly doubled since 1990, one of the fastest growing corridors in the country. It's home to a major military presence, a large medical sector, and the kind of sprawling suburban development that has defined Sunbelt growth for 3 decades. And it drinks almost entirely from one underground source. The city's water security has always rested on the assumption that the Edwards would keep delivering, and that assumption has been tested harder with each passing decade. The 2011 drought was the warning shot. Rainfall across the recharge zone collapsed. The Edwards dropped to critical stages, triggering mandatory pumping restrictions across the region. It was the first time the city had seen that kind of forced cutback. The aquifer recovered after the drought broke. San Antonio's water utility has since invested in diversification, conservation programs, recycled water systems, brackish groundwater development. The utility has made genuine progress and has publicly stated that it has secured water supply into the 2070s through a combination of sources. But climate projections are unambiguous on one point. The droughts that stressed the Edwards most are going to become more frequent. And during a drought of record, the worst-case scenario planners are required to plan for, the water supply gap for Central Texas by 2070 is measured in millions of acre-feet, enough to supply San Antonio 20 times over in a single year. The Edwards also carries a major legal complication. The aquifer sustains two major spring systems that are home to several species found nowhere else on Earth. Fountain darters, Texas blind salamanders, Texas wild rice, all federally listed under the Endangered Species Act. When aquifer levels drop low enough to threaten spring flows, federal law enters the equation. Pumping restrictions aren't just about people. They're about avoiding ESA violations. That adds a layer of legal complexity to drought management that no straightforward supply plan can fully resolve. San Antonio's total annual residential water use runs to roughly 50 billion gallons. Hold that number, because a new competitor for that water just arrived, and it moves faster than any farmer or city planner anticipated. Texas is the center of the American AI infrastructure build-out. Cheap land, relatively cheap electricity, business-friendly regulation, no state income tax. Every major tech company has either built a data center in Texas or announced plans to. The investment is enormous, and it is accelerating. Data centers need water. A large facility uses water for cooling, continuously, in high volumes, year-round. The servers generate heat. The cooling systems draw water, run it through thermal exchange, and release it back as evaporated vapor or warm discharge. This is a core operating requirement, as essential to the facility as electricity. Texas data centers currently consume an estimated 25 billion gallons of water per year. By 2030, projections put that figure at 161 billion gallons annually. That's a six-fold increase in roughly 4 years. Put that number next to something familiar. San Antonio's total annual residential water use is about 50 billion gallons. The projected 2030 Texas data center demand is more than 3 times that. The entire city of San Antonio, every shower and tap and lawn and pool, 3 times over. A May 2026 report from the University of Texas estimates data centers could account for up to 9% of Texas water use by 2040. For context, manufacturing accounts for about 7% of Texas water use today. In less than 20 years, the industry running artificial intelligence could outpace the water footprint of all Texas manufacturing combined. Most of these facilities are being built in Central and South Texas, the same counties drawing from the Edwards Aquifer. Under the rule of capture, there is no legal mechanism requiring a data center operator to demonstrate that water is available before drilling and pumping. A company can acquire land, drill a well, and begin drawing from the same source that supplies San Antonio's taps. No prior approval, no allocation study, no demonstration that the shared aquifer can sustain the added withdrawal. The legal framework that opened the Panhandle to industrial-scale irrigation in the 20th century is now doing the same for industrial-scale computing in the 21st. During drought restrictions, Texas residents were asked to take shorter showers. Data centers were asked nothing. Texas has seen this dynamic before. The resource is finite. The law rewards maximum extraction. Demand is accelerating. What's different this time is that the state knows it, and it's now spending more money than it has ever committed to finding a different path. In November 2025, Texas voters approved Proposition 4. It passed with strong support. The measure dedicates up to $1 billion per year from existing sales tax revenue to the Texas Water Fund for 20 years. $20 billion total. The largest water infrastructure investment in the state's 180-year history. The money and the political will are real. Texas didn't hesitate on this. But the Texas Water Development Board's draft 2027 State Water Plan, released in April 2026, puts the actual price tag at $174 billion through 2080. That's more than double the $80 billion estimate from the previous plan 4 years earlier. Proposition 4's $20 billion covers roughly 11 cents on every dollar the plan requires. The plan's core projections are worth sitting with. By 2080, Texas water demand grows about 6%. Existing supply falls 10%. The gap between them compounds. The Texas Tribune reported in April 2026 that if Texas does not implement the plan, the state is one severe drought away from an estimated $91 billion in economic damages in 2030 alone. The proposed solutions are real engineering, not wishful thinking. Large-scale desalination, brackish groundwater treatment, aquifer storage and recovery, injecting treated water underground during wet years to draw back in dry ones. Direct potable reuse, recycling treated wastewater back into drinking supplies. All of these technologies exist. All have been demonstrated at smaller scales. None are anywhere near the volume the plan requires. Corpus Christi is already moving. In February 2026, the City Council approved $405 million in emergency water projects. By May 2026, the city was in talks on a proposed $1.3 billion brackish water desalination facility, a private plant that would require the city to commit to 30 years of purchases. Seawater desalination is the logical large-scale answer, and here is where Texas geography creates a constraint that money alone can't fix. Texas has 367 miles of Gulf coastline, but it's made up of barrier islands, lagoons, and sand flats, not deep harbor. Large-scale seawater desalination requires proximity to open water, accessible land for infrastructure, and favorable coastal geology. Texas Gulf sites are more expensive to engineer than equivalent facilities in California or the Middle East, for the same structural reason that Houston had to dredge a 50-mile ship channel just to reach ocean freight. The geography that made the Panhandle fertile wasn't designed for deepwater industrial infrastructure. Neither was the coast. Israel gets roughly 85% of its drinking water from desalination. That system took about 25 years of serious investment to reach national scale. Texas is at year 1. The math is hard, but Texas isn't standing still. That's worth something. Whether it's enough, and whether it's fast enough, is a different question. Go back to those Panhandle fields. The water beneath them took millions of years to accumulate. Serious large-scale pumping in the Texas High Plains began around 1950. 3 generations drew down what the Ice Age built. That's not a story of recklessness exactly. It's a story of incentives. The law rewarded extraction. The economy rewarded production. The technology made it easy. Every rational actor in that system made rational decisions. The aquifer didn't care about rational decisions. Texas has the money now. It has the engineers. It has, after Proposition 4, genuine political commitment. What it doesn't have is the luxury of slow timelines. A formation that took 6,000 years to fill does not wait for a legislative session. The geography that built Texas was always a set of gifts with expiration dates. The oil depletes. The water runs low. The coast floods. The land itself doesn't change. What the land can sustain does. Texas didn't build its power on bad assumptions. It built it on geology. The question now is whether the engineering can keep up with what the geology is taking back. If you want to understand how Texas built that power in the first place, the Permian Basin, the oil fields, the Texas Triangle, the first Texas video covers all of it. I'll link it above. The world has a structure. Let's keep finding it.